From inside the Banner offices along a still snowy Inner Harbor, it is the Banner Ravens podcast. Paul Mancano and Jonas Shaffer. We have a lot to discuss here in this podcast. We're going to be bringing in Giana Han, fellow Ravens beat writer, to break down some possibilities for this playoff game and give her concerned Harbaugh scale for all of these possibilities. We are also going to be, of course, previewing this game against the Texans on Saturday, and we've got injury news to discuss. Mark Andrews, will he be back for the game Saturday? All that and more coming up, but first, let's get a quick word from our sponsors.
If you have an appetite for saving money, then you should get the Rofo Rewards app from Royal Farms. Use the Rofo Rewards app to place mobile orders for pickup or delivery and earn royalty points to redeem for free stuff. And right now, new Rofo Rewards members will get a free any-size coffee for signing up. You can download the Rofo Rewards app at the Apple App Store or Google Play today. You'll find it's a very appealing app to have. Real fresh, real fast. Royal Farms.
The CIAA Men's and Women's Basketball Tournament is February 26th through March 3rd at CFG Bank Arena. Baltimore is bringing the hoops, the culture, and the energy. So grab your tickets now and book your hotel at baltimore.org/CIAA.
All right, Jonas, we are joined now by Giana Han, also of the Baltimore Banner, the very same outlet from which we come. Giana, thank you so much for joining us. We have some possibilities to run through here on this podcast, some concerned Harbaugh scales to give out. You introduced that scale on the BaltimoreBanner.com when we were discussing potential playoff opponents, but now we've got some options for the game. Are you ready to run through these?
Let's do it.
Jonas, you want to start us off here?
Yeah, let's start off with the big boy in the room, and that is CJ Stroud and the possibility of him just going supernova on this, you know what. He's coming off an incredible game against the Browns. Basically one half of work, 274 yards, 3 touchdowns, tore apart an elite Browns defense, likely offensive rookie of the year. What is the possibility, Giana, that we are looking at a CJ Stroud takeover game?
1 to 10 concerned Harbaughs.
I would honestly put it at 8 because I think that's my biggest concern out of all the concerns. I feel like he just keeps getting better. He's not regressing, so we don't even know what he can do at this point. So obviously just completely outdueled a Browns defense that's led the entire league for most of the season, and he's getting better. That's him with no games under his belt. Now he has 1 playoff game under his belt. So I'm a little scared of CJ Stroud. I'm not going to lie.
So how many Harbaughs would that be? 8?
I would say 8. Yeah.
Wow.
I would put it probably the highest. I think that the reason it's not a 10 is because there's also a possibility that like Lamar goes equally as crazy and then they cancel out.
Yeah, exactly. All right, cold weather. We know that this is supposed to be a cold game because it has been a cold week here in Baltimore. As I was walking into work today, the water in the Inner Harbor across the bridge, frozen, Jonas.
Good anecdote.
Yeah, thank you. Those fish.
Poor fish.
What is your concern level for the weather on Saturday? It's supposed to be 27 degrees as a high, so it could be even lower around kickoff. Lamar has played in just 1 game in his NFL career in which the temp was below 30 at kickoff, and that was back in 2018. Obviously, the Texans don't have a whole lot of experience playing in the cold weather either, coming from their dome. But what is your concern level, Giana, of just the weather factor being an issue for the Ravens?
I would put it at maybe a 4, mostly because of what you said with the Houston Texans not having that experience. So yeah, Lamar kind of scares me in the cold because you see him in Jacksonville with this giant parka on. It's like, oh man, this man is not built for the cold. But at the same time, he's experienced it. Even if he hasn't played it that much, he's been here for it. The Texans, they practiced yesterday outside to prepare for the cold. And it was, I'm not gonna lie, it was pretty cold there. It had a low in the 20s, but the thing is they had a high in the 40s. And so they were getting warmer as practice went on, whereas the Ravens high yesterday was basically their low. So even if they practice outside, Houston just can't replicate that. They would literally need to like go stand in a freezer and then try to catch some balls to truly get how cold it was. So while it is kind of concerning from the Ravens' part, it's more concerning from the Texans' part. I think it could work in the Ravens' favor.
Yeah, Jonas, you'll like this anecdote because you're part of it. All three of us were at practice yesterday in Owings Mills, just freezing our butts off. Absolutely frigid. We were only out there for like 20 minutes of the practice that was way longer than that.
And there were guys not wearing long sleeves. So
what do you do? Who are you trying to impress at that point?
Yeah, I think the cold is a little bit overblown. I mean, if we see guys like Tyreek Hill in the Dolphins Chief game going out there without long sleeves and they're on heated benches with like these furnace blasts just blasting them, I think it's a little bit oversold, I guess. Lamar has big enough hands that I think you don't worry about the ball security. CJ Stroud.
He's no Kenny Pickett.
No Kenny Pickett, no Joe Burrow. You know, if the cold weather does anything, I guess it's maybe dictating the play calling a little bit, but the Ravens probably won't have that much success running the ball. The Texans probably won't have that much success running the ball just because of the strength and weaknesses of those two units. So I feel like it's kind of a wash anyway. I just don't really see this being too much of an issue for either team.
I think it just increases variability for this game, just because I feel like weird things can happen. I mean, we saw how the wet factor has affected the Ravens in games against the Colts. We saw in Week 18 the fumbling issues. Obviously, that probably won't be an issue. I don't think it's supposed to snow at all, but cold just adds another layer to all of this.
I guess I would add, you want to make sure that your guys are limber enough. You know, that was always the thing. You know, when I was playing soccer back in the day, you didn't want to play
high-class
in
athlete
cold weather because the possibility of pulling something, of tweaking something, the risks are a little bit greater when you are playing in that colder weather.
And you didn't even have the beard back then.
No, I don't. Gianna, let's move on from my beard to the Ravens pass protection. This is a Houston team that finished third in the NFL in pass rush win rate. They made life pretty hellish for Joe Flacco on Saturday. However, Will Anderson and Jonathan Grenard, probably their two best pass rushers, both limited in practice, neither of whom played more than 50% of the snaps against Cleveland. Ravens have a couple weeks now to get healthy. Ronnie Stanley, Morgan Moses, maybe closer to full strength than ever before. We've seen them struggle so far, you know, at points this season. Where are you with the concern level for the Ravens pass pro versus the Texans pass rush?
What is your concern level with your cat making noise in the background?
I know exactly what that noise is. He's knocking the top off my Keurig. It's a of his. So he's taking advantage of me being held captive right now, not able to stop. Nice. But pass protection, I would kind of put it at 5, evens out for me personally, because I feel like, as you said, the Ravens unit has been up there. And the one thing that has really held them back that we've seen have been the injuries. They just aren't performing quite as well when you don't have those starters in there. And now they've had weeks of rest. They also have guys who've played in the playoffs before. I know Ronnie Stanley sounds extra motivated right now not to let 2019 happen again. And they're not like, a good pass rush is not anything new for them. They've played a lot of great guys, and these guys might be some of the best, but they have faced the Browns, who once again had one of the best defenses and have some Pro Bowl pass rushers. They face TJ Watt, who's Pro Bowl pass rusher. So they definitely have seen it before, whether it's coming from the outside linebackers, inside. They've seen it all, even the Chargers and everything. We've seen, am I thinking of the right team? I mixed up the LA teams, but
Doesn't help that they were like back-to-back on either sides.
Yeah, and they're the same colors. So, you know, and they have very similar looking logos. But anyway, either way, you know who I'm talking about. So I feel like it's not anything new for them. I think they know what to do. It's a little bit scary. Like, yeah, they could affect the game, and Lamar doesn't do fantastic when being pressured, but Lamar has been better at doing things when being pressured. Sorry, my cat's really making himself known right now. He wants to be a star. And
we concern our boss for the cat.
Yeah.
So to wrap it up, I think I trust this Ravens pass protection.
Yeah. In terms of the Ravens defense against this Texans offense, you really would have a hard time pointing out any flaws or any potential holes in this Ravens defense. only a couple times this season they've faced above average, top 10, top 5 tight ends. Dalton Schultz, I don't know if he's quite a top 5 tight end. He might be a top 10 tight end, maybe. Went for over 800 yards this season, combined with Brevin Jordan, who had a big 75-yard touchdown in their game against the Browns. But if you remember, George Kittle in that Christmas Day game had 126 yards, caught 7 of 10 passes. They kind of shut him down after halftime, but the first half, certainly, he looked like he was ready to tear up the middle of the field, particularly against the Ravens. And then the other strong performance from a tight end, Trey McBride of the Cardinals, caught 10 of 14 passes for 95 yards. That was his third highest total of the season. How concerned would you be about the tight end tandem in Houston and maybe some potential weakness in the middle of the field with Roquan Smith and Patrick Queen maybe not being as strong against the tight ends?
You know, it wasn't as big of a factor as the ones you mentioned, but I picture just Njoku, like, even after he got burned, there were some big plays that he made. But I think I would put it maybe a 6 because, as you mentioned, these are like burned in my brain. Those are the guys where I'm like, is this defense not as stalwart as we thought they were? But at the same time, the Texans are seeing it on film, but the Ravens are seeing it on film because they spent the whole bye week going back and looking at themselves before they started working on their next opponent, since they did not know who it was. And they're going to get some other guys back. It's not going to be just on Patrick Queen and Roquan Smith. I think the return of Kyle Hamilton will make a difference. He also is big enough to kind of offset that, but the pass protection has been good outside of the tight ends, and I would like to think that Mike McDonald will find a way to figure it out, even though there's only so much you can do with personnel. But I feel like they're going to find an answer. However, I'm not going to lie, that is a little bit scary, so I'm putting it above 5 and putting it at 6.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would probably put it closer to a 3 just because of the return of Kyle Hamilton, and so much of the damage from tight ends in the passing game will come off play action, come off run fakes, and I just don't think Houston will have a lot of joy running the ball against the Ravens this weekend. Obviously, if it is Marcus Williams in space being asked to make a tackle, then the concern Harbaugh meter maybe goes off the charts a little bit, as opposed to Roquan Smith, Patrick Queen, Kyle Hamilton. Certainly, you do worry about it, but I don't think Dalton Schultz and Brevin Jordan will be as wide ass open as they were.
Thank goodness we're an explicit podcast
against Cleveland. Gianna, let's wrap it up with the big one, the elephant in the room, the Lamar of it all. Not a great record as a postseason starter. Still looking for that playoff breakthrough. John Harbaugh wants it for him. His teammates want it for him. Lamar wants it for him. He has not been great in his starts. That was the old Lamar. That was the Greg Roman offense Lamar. How worried are you about the possibility that this MVP level Lamar will not carry over into the playoffs, and the Lamar that we see will remind everyone about some of the unfortunate games that he's had in his postseason career?
That's a hard one to put a number on because, I mean, you've heard me say so many times in the press box, are we going to get evil twin Lamar today? And if evil twin Lamar comes, then my concern level is at a 10 because one of the players just told me yesterday, this team rises and falls with Lamar. So if Lamar is not on his game, then I don't even know. Like, the defense cannot win the game for them. However, I don't want to put it that high because if you've seen Lamar this season, if you've seen him in the locker room, in the press conferences, heard about him in the locker room, seen him on the sidelines, it's different this year for him. He's always winning the Super Bowl, but this year that obsession level has amped up more than a notch. And I think that he thrives on being the underdog. He's not the underdog in this case. He is the number 1 seed. However, in his mind, he is the underdog and has been the underdog the whole season, just the way that media is talking or not talking, like from a national standpoint, not us, but the way they talk about the team, the TV times, I know the defense mentioned that, they just have this feeling that they are just getting slept on, and Lamar thrives on that. We've seen how he performs, and he feels like they're not being granted respect. And between that and just this different level of focus, he might have messed up in the past, but he's also different than he was. He's showing a new level of film study, a new level of attention to his body, a new level of leadership in the locker room, of accountability. So I don't think that he's necessarily the Lamar of the past in terms of other seasons. The Lamar that I'm scared about is more like the random things you've seen this season that have happened in the losses. But just as much as I'm scared of Lamar making mistakes, it's also the people around him, because even if he plays his best, I'm thinking of, well, he didn't play his best in the Steelers game, but he didn't play terrible at first, and the other people around him let him down. But I just feel like he's not going to let that happen. He wants a Super Bowl so bad, and this is the year. Whether people want to say it or not, this is the year that they're going to win it. And after this, we can get it. I'm sure you guys will get into the free agents later, but it might not be pretty.
Yeah. How do you feel about it, Jonas?
Yeah, I mean, I think the stat that is most telling to me about Lamar and this Ravens offense is, and we were talking about this yesterday, they are the number one most efficient offense in football when trailing. They haven't trailed a whole lot this year. That was something that we, if we had time, we were going to bring up, but they are by far the most efficient offense when trailing, which speaks to Lamar's ability to put this team on his back, whether it's the first quarter, second quarter, fourth quarter, and lead them to victory in ways that maybe he hadn't in the past. So obviously you don't want to overreact to a 1-game sample size, to a 4-game sample size. We know Dak Prescott, has been a very, very good quarterback in his career. The postseason results just have not been there. And that's how, unfortunately, the NFL world sees him. And this is a big, big spot for Lamar, just to cast off those labels, to shake that narrative, and to prove something. And all eyes are going to be on him on Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, you mentioned the lack of time trailing. 2 hours and 18 minutes in 17 games total. That's not real time. That's game time. And that includes the week 17 loss where Lamar did not play at all. So that is the shortest amount of time of any team in the NFL spent trailing. And yes, they have the most efficient offense when trailing, but there's just such a lack of sample size when it comes to seeing this Ravens offense have to come back in a game, especially late, having to put their throat on a team. And we saw them have to come back in that game against the Rams. That was a great win and a great come from behind win in the fourth quarter. But, if the game gets tight, they're going to need the very best out of Lamar Jackson. Gianna, let's get to the real reason that we got you on here. Let's talk snacks real quick. You wrote about on the BaltimoreBanner.com the sheer amount of calories and food that the nutritionist of the Baltimore Ravens has to provide for this team. What were some of the mind-boggling stats that came out of that article that is number one on NFL subreddit, I believe, right now?
So I know that people kind of guess higher than this because I think, especially in Maryland, everyone knows about Michael Phelps and his 1,200 calories a day or whatever it is, or 12,000. But 6,000 calories for offensive linemen, I just can't imagine eating that much. And it's funny because Justice Hill was telling me he's a running back. And so he needs a little bit of bulk, right? He has to go through those aforementioned linemen, through the defensive linemen, but he doesn't tend to eat a lot. And I don't know what his calorie count is, but he says he struggles to eat what he's supposed to. And then he says the big men just making it look easy, but basically they have to constantly snack. So I was fascinated by the snack wall because it has pretty colors. It's lit up. I walk past every day. Really, like the juices, they're like bright, like magenta and a green. And I was like, what's that? But then when I learned specifically with the linemen, snacks are so important to the success of this team. So we just kind of dug in, and I thought it was going to be a short little story. It was not. We talked for 45 minutes. I learned so much. And then, of course, everyone I'm sure has seen, because ESPN posted it, the 7,000 peanut butter and jelly sandwiches that we won't call by name because the Ravens asked us not to. And then just like thousands of beef jerky. I have the numbers literally just out of reach. But I know beef jerky sticks were the next. I know Rashad Bateman told me it reminds him of being from the South. So that's cute. And it's just like kind of helps them focus because they're chewing, and then it also gives them protein. Lots of sunflower seeds. That beautiful purple juice is actually beet juice, but it does taste like berries. However, for the guys that still don't like it, they give out shots. So they give those out in the thousands. And so, yeah, I mean, it's not super surprising since they have 53-man roster plus practice squad plus training camp, but it's just a lot of food consumed on top of the 3 meals a day they're feeding them. So they get 3 meals a day if they want it and 2 snacks. So lots of food. That
Speak for yourself, Gianna.
That is awesome, and it's some great stats from that story on the BaltimoreBanner.com, where you can subscribe $1 for 6 months. Gianna, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you in the press box on Saturday. I know your cat is desperate for your attention right now, so we'll let you get
maybe he's desperate for y'all's attention. Though. He's meant to be famous, but
yeah.
Anyway, I'll see you guys at the Ravens.
Yeah, sounds good. Giana Han joining us here on the Banner Ravens podcast, Paul Mancano and Jonas Shaffer. All right, Jonas, before we get into our full preview of this game, let's talk about some injury news. So let's start with Mark Andrews. He talked to the media yesterday for the first time in over a month, closer to 2 months, since he suffered that injury. What was your biggest takeaway from what he said in front of his locker?
Dedicated viewers / listeners of this podcast will probably remember me on Tuesday saying that I gave Mark about a 10% chance of playing in the divisional round. I would like to rescind that prediction and revise it and push it closer to 60%, 70%.
All right.
I don't know. I mean, it is. Imagine me telling you, Paul, 2 weeks ago that Mark Andrews would have a better chance of playing in the playoff opener than Marlon Humphrey.
Yeah.
That's where we are right now. Mark was a full participant in practice Wednesday. Full participation doesn't really mean a whole lot because there are guys who are quote unquote full participants who are still limping out of practice, not looking anywhere close to 100%. But he was a full participant. Marlon wasn't practicing. And, he said, Mark has, that every week he feels like he's taking big leaps in his recovery from that ankle surgery. He's looked good in practice. He looks comfortable cutting off both feet. He looks comfortable leaping. There's not a lot of rust in terms of just making the catches that you wonder how much time he's been able to even spend on the jug machine with his rehab going on. So, they don't need him. Obviously, Lamar has wrapped up that MVP race without him. Isaiah Likely has stepped up. Charlie Kohler has stepped up. But it would be nice to have Mark Andrews, Lamar's favorite target in his entire career, back. And he's, not going to be 100% if he comes back. Might not be 100% at any point during this playoff run. But still, to have him as an option, if not this weekend, then probably most likely next weekend, is definitely a very, very good thing.
So good news on that front. You mentioned Marlon Humphrey, though. We've just kind of eagerly been awaiting his return from that calf injury, and we just haven't seen him yet. What do you think is going on there?
It's an aggravation of what he dealt with earlier this season, and that was an injury that took a couple weeks to get back from. We don't really know what the full timetable of that one was because I believe he came back after the bye, so there was no real indication of the exact timeline for how long it took to recover. But I think we mentioned this last week or on Tuesday's pod. He looks fine walking around the locker room. Obviously, it's a very, very different situation from just casually lolling about and actually running and cutting and doing the game stuff that you need to on the practice field. But if he doesn't feel right, he doesn't feel right. And, the Ravens have been burned by him going out there and not being at full game speed, full game strength every single time that he's come back from an injury this year. That first game back has been a bit of a rough go. And I don't know if that means that if the Ravens win on Saturday and they advance to the championship game, then we should brace ourselves for a potentially bad Marlon game in the AFC Championship game. But, John Harbaugh, when we talked to him on Monday, said he was pretty optimistic about all these guys being available for the playoffs. And so far, haven't seen Marlon, haven't seen Delshon Phillips. I imagine we probably won't today and heading out to practice in about an hour. And, those are the bumps. Those are the deficiencies you have to deal with. The Ravens played and beat the Texans without Marlon Humphrey in week 1, and it looks like they'll probably have to do it again right now.
Yeah. All right, let's get into this matchup here. It is, as you mentioned, a rematch of their week 1 game. So for one of these teams, they will start and end their season with this opponent. Jonas, on our last podcast, where you can watch it on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook, I went through some of the comments after the fact. Got a little bit blown up by some Texans fans.
Hi, guys.
Who were critical of at least our optimism, I think you could say, about the Ravens' ability to win this game. Look, the Ravens are heavily favored in this game for a reason. They're playing at home. They have the MVP candidate. When I was saying that we underestimated the Texans, I literally meant you and I underestimated the Texans. I don't know if, and I doubt that the Ravens themselves in that locker room are underestimating the Texans. However, they are heavily favored. This game is 4:30 on Saturday on ESPN/ABC. Jonas, we talked about this Texans team being kind of middle of the pack in terms of offense and defense. But when you look at the 4 remaining teams in the AFC, it so often comes down to who has the best quarterback. And that's regular season, but especially in the postseason. And you look at the 4 quarterbacks that are left, and you could make a solid case that's 4 of the top 6 quarterbacks in the AFC, save maybe Justin Herbert and, I don't know who else. Trevor Lawrence is maybe out there that might still be better, but certainly the way that CJ Stroud has played this season, he deserves to be in this conversation of one of the better quarterbacks in this conference.
Yeah, I mean, we should have had the meme that I slacked to you earlier this week of the guys lining up, around the corner of the military, and it's 4 quarterbacks who are legit, all the AFC quarterbacks, and then whatever scrub comes out of the NFC.
The one clown.
Yeah, the one clown. And that's what it feels like. I mean, we are in a world, we're in a playoff matchup where CJ Stroud could be every bit Lamar's equal, if not better. That is just the level of confidence that he's playing with. That is the freedom and the opportunities that he has in this Bobby Slowick offense. He's been balling out of control. I mean, I think like over the second half of the season, he was like PFF's 5th rated passer. And that's including a game where he threw, I think, 2 or 3 picks against Arizona. So
3, I think.
Yeah. He doesn't have the weapons that he did in week 1, but he is a more capable passer. You see like the Colts linebackers after that week 18 game get on mic in front of their own podcast and just rave about the kind of stuff that he's able to do with his drops, with his head fakes, with his reads, with his off structure throws. CJ Stroud was good. He was fine in week 1. He is a much better quarterback now. That connection with Nico Collins is much better now. I imagine Bobby Slowick has a much better understanding of how to attack this Ravens defense or just attack with CJ Stroud in general. So it's going to be one hell of a test. And, you're talking about the Ravens preparing for possibly what awaits in the AFC Championship game. No better tune-up possibly than CJ Stroud, considering the level that he's playing at right now.
Yeah, now he will be without Tank Dell, who is the second leading receiver on the team. We didn't know in week 1, and just as we didn't know how good CJ Stroud was going to be this season, we didn't know how good Tank Dell was going to be for them. Noah Brown also out of this game, the 4th leading receiver for the Texans, but they do have Devin Singletary. I think they have a stronger rushing attack now than they did in week 1. They switched over, essentially, started giving Devin Singletary more carries throughout the season. The first 8 games, he averaged 8 carries a game. The last 9 regular season games, 17 carries a game. He finished with close to 900 rushing yards this season, 30 catches, almost 200 receiving yards out of the backfield. So he is a receiving threat as well. I think it's a more balanced, a better offense. But Jonas, Mike Macdonald has had some experience going up against CJ Stroud in his career, back when he was at Michigan as the defensive coordinator there, going up against an Ohio State team that was led by CJ Stroud. But he's not taking that experience with him. He said yesterday when you asked him about it, he's throwing out that game. That was so long ago. It was a totally different scheme. But they do have tape against CJ Stroud from week 1.
Right.
How do you think each side of this matchup will approach each other now that they have seen what they have to offer?
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating. There's not been a whole lot of opportunities for us to measure, to who it benefits most to see that quarterback go against that defensive coordinator and this Ravens defense a second time. The only time it's happened this year was Joe Burrow, and it's tough to measure the before and after, because when the Ravens went to Cincinnati, Joe Burrow was hobbled, wasn't his best. When he came to Baltimore for that primetime game, he was a lot better against the Ravens. He had more help, but he also left that game, late in the second quarter with an injury. So the Ravens were able to put that game away pretty easily. But if you want to draw conclusions from that one game, Joe Burrow looked a lot more comfortable picking apart that Ravens secondary, that Ravens pass defense, than he did the first time in Cincinnati. And that was, again, with a Ravens home crowd. So I don't know if that means that we should be expecting the same thing from CJ Stroud and this Texans passing offense. If Joe Burrow can make adjustments, then so can Mike McDonald. This is a Ravens defense that's obviously gotten a lot better in a lot of crucial areas. I think the fact that their run defense should be pretty stout against this Texans run offense means that they can set Houston up for disadvantageous second and long, third and longs, and that's when Mike McDonald can really wreak havoc with his pass rushes, his simulated pressures, his creepers. But CJ Stroud's a ball player. It's as simple as that. And if the Ravens can't force takeaways, and if they can't get off the field, like has been the case over the second half of the season, basically ever since they got back from the bye, then this could be a much more high-scoring game than maybe we expect.
Yeah, and on the other side of the ball, you mentioned with Giana, the pass rush that the Texans have to offer. A little bit hobbled, but they still have some premier talents on that line with Will Anderson and Jonathan Grenard combining for almost 20 sacks between the two of them. They added Derek Barnett midway through the season. He has been very good for them as well. This is a Texans defense that is stout against the run, and it's best against best because it's the second best run defense according to DVOA, and the Ravens led the league in rushing yards per game. But it's a different kind of rushing attack that the Ravens present, because it is not led by one back. It is Lamar Jackson that is leading the rushing attack. So maybe that changes the way that they have to defend, and maybe that is a potential weakness in that Texans run defense, to have a running quarterback like Lamar. He is the ultimate weapon against any defense, but maybe that is how you crack through this Texans defensive line.
Yeah, I mean, Houston, to their credit, did a great job against Lamar and this Ravens rushing offense, which in week one had J.K. Dobbins. They had a healthier Ronnie Stanley. They had a healthier Morgan Moses. Ravens just 3.4 yards per carry. I think only about 110 yards total. But you're right. I mean, the Ravens have gone against supposedly stout rushing defenses this year. And because those supposedly stout rushing defenses had not faced a quarterback-driven run game like the Ravens, things fell apart pretty quickly. It is a much different beast, a much different animal to go from a conventional running game to one that is driven by Lamar and by read options and everything the Ravens can do with motion and stuff like that. So Texans will have Blake Cashman for this one. Great linebacker, great run stopper. They didn't have him in week one. Didn't really matter a whole lot. But if the Ravens can get their run game going, if they can ratchet up their level from the level that it was at in week one, then that opens up the play action passing game. And that is where Houston has been vulnerable this year. The Texans are starting a safety who was a practice squad guy here in Baltimore before the Texans snatched him up. So
Justin Houston Carson, I believe.
DeAndre Houston Carson.
Sorry.
Not Justin Houston. Shout out Justin Houston.
DeAndre Houston Carson in the right city, though. Yeah. I will say that or Carson. Where's Carson?
California.
Carson, California.
Yeah.
Okay. So it could have ended up in Carson, but yeah.
So the Ravens, again, they were able to stay ahead of the chains in week one. It wasn't a great experience for the offense in general. I think less than 300 total yards. But again, this offense with 2 weeks off, with guys getting healthy, with Lamar being locked in, you should feel good about where they are, especially playing at home, having that home field energy, that home field advantage. Odell's healthier, Rashad Bateman's healthier. Maybe this is a nice spot for Dalvin Cook to do something. You feel good about where the Ravens are, and it's a big moment for Lamar. This is a huge, huge opportunity for him, like we talked about earlier, to just stop the narrative, change the narrative, become the guy who is, look more like regular season Lamar than playoff Lamar.
I'm glad you mentioned Dalvin Cook, because the Ravens made a roster move yesterday by releasing Melvin Gordon and then today adding Dalvin Cook to their 53-man roster. Does that tell you, Jonas, that they just have more faith in Dalvin Cook and his ability to contribute to a potential game than Melvin Gordon, who we saw struggle at times throughout the season and have some fumbling issues, especially down the stretch?
Yeah, we haven't. There's not a whole lot for us to go on in terms of how Dalvin Cook might fit in Baltimore, just because we haven't seen him.
Right.
So I wouldn't expect more than a handful of snaps for him on Saturday. Assume that he is, the third running back called up. It's tough to say. Like we've talked about, not a lot of experience with zone reads, with read options. That whole mesh point can get a little bit messy for guys who don't have that experience. We don't know how the Ravens feel about his pass protection. We don't know how the Ravens feel about his understanding of this offense. The fact that, he is basically being inserted into this offense in place of Melvin Gordon should, I guess, tell you something about their comfort level with him.
Right.
But, for people who are expecting a big game or even a big playoff, push from him, I still say hold your horses there.
Yeah. Jonas, what's your score prediction for this game? You ready to anger a lot of Texans fans?
No, they were in my head a little bit when you mentioned them before the game. I think it's going to be a close game. I think my pick is Ravens 28, Texans 24. Not everyone can pick a score that basically lines up with the spread. You coward.
All right, we'll get to mine.
I just think the Texans are in a good spot right now. The Ravens are in a good spot right now. I think there will be some tightness on both sides, perhaps. I think it's a little bit unrealistic to expect the Ravens to keep blowing out really, really good teams. You wonder if things don't go well for the Ravens in that first quarter, what kind of energy will be reciprocated between the Ravens and the crowd. There will be some teeth gnashing, some knuckle
wailing.
clutching.
Yeah.
But I just think in general, when you look at all three phases of this game, the Ravens should have the better offense. They should have the better defense, and special teams, probably pretty close to equal. I think Ravens were number 2 in DVOA, but Rick Gosselin, who does special teams rankings, had, I believe, Houston number one overall. So you can kind of have your pick of which unit you prefer. Ravens getting back Devin Duvernay, which might help them, although Tylan Wallace and Justice Hill have both done nice things there. So I just think playoff games, you kind of throw out a bit of the regular season. You just look at who's going to step up in big spots. And I think the Ravens, with their health, with their coaching, with a time off, should have the advantage to squeak out a close win.
Yeah, you're not going to see the same differential point-wise that you saw in week 1, 25-9. This is a much better Texans team. This is a much more evolved offense. This is a much better CJ Stroud at this point. But at the same time, you could make a case that this is a better Ravens offense as well, even though they did have J.K. Dobbins in that first game. And he had that leap into the end zone. Remember, when I was rewatching that game, I was just getting a little misty-eyed thinking about what he could still bring to this offense. However, Jonas, I did pick right along the line. I have 27 for the Ravens and 17.5 for the for the Texans. It's actually 27-17 is my score prediction. And I was really thinking that it was going to be a closer game. And then the closer that we're getting to game day and the more I'm hearing Lamar Jackson just talk about how much he wants this. I mean, and Gianna was talking about it as well. He is fully locked in and this is his time, if not now, when? And this is the time for Lamar Jackson to step up. I do think the Texans offense might struggle a little bit in the cold, and the Ravens defense just has the ability to just put their foot on an opponent. Whether the offense can maintain their same level of production throughout the course of a game, and if they get down in the fourth quarter, that's when things get dicey. But if the Ravens can jump out ahead, and if they can rely on that defense in the fourth quarter in a freezing cold M&T Bank Stadium with the crowd behind them, you just feel good about their chances to be able to put away a young Texans team that's led by a rookie quarterback and a rookie head coach.
Great coaching matchup. D'Amico Ryan's awesome. Bobby Slowick, maybe a coach as soon as next year. Mike McDonald, maybe a coach as soon as next year. Todd Monken in the running as well. John Harbaugh, having done yeoman's work to just have this team on an even keel, believing in each other. It's going to be a lot of fun. This is game where you kind of wonder what each staff has up their sleeve.
Yeah.
Will we see Odell throw a pass? When I was looking back at his playoff record, I was like, oh yeah, you remember in the 2022 or 2021 playoffs, he had I think a 40-yard completion in that first game against the Cardinals where the Rams blew them out. Maybe there's some stuff from Lamar that we haven't seen. Maybe there's stuff from CJ Stroud that we haven't seen. This is the kind of game where you don't leave anything to chance and kind of put it all on the table.
Yeah, it's going to be a fascinating matchup. We could see legitimately between these two teams, the NFL Coach of the Year, like you said, and D'Amico Ryans. Slowick could be a head coach. McDonald could be a head coach. Monkey could be a head coach. Anthony Weaver could be a head coach.
Yeah.
We could be seeing all of these guys on different teams in a year's time. But I just love the final four teams in the AFC, all four of those teams led by very good quarterbacks right now. It's just exciting. Very exciting times. Let us know what you think is going to happen in Saturday's game. Comment below. Please give us a like, a thumbs up, a reply. If you give us a good review on Apple Podcasts, we will read it here on the podcast. Follow Jonas at Jonas_Shaffer on Twitter. I am at Paul Mancano and also at All Banner Sports. And please do subscribe to the Baltimore Banner if you haven't already. $1 for 6 months. Thanks so much for tuning in. Our next podcast will be after the divisional round game. We will have an episode for you from somewhere in the press box at M&T Bank Stadium to break down either a thrilling win or a devastating loss. For Jonas Shaffer, I'm Paul Mancano. Thanks so much for tuning in.